Hey guys, thank you so much and welcome to the Game Your Future podcast, where we help gamers realize their full potential. I'm Daniel, and I am joined by Nazim Nadir, or Naz, I think as you prefer to be called, and he is an IT professional. He is a gamer, he is a streamer, especially around Final Fantasy XIV, which I also enjoy and love, and is a hardcore raider in the Final Fantasy XIV scene. For those that know me, I probably don't do as much hardcore anymore, but definitely back in the day. So very good. So Naz, thank you so much and welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your streamer journey and just kind of the gaming in general. And maybe we'll go back to kind of when you started, right? As far as like how long have you been a gamer and what sort of games do you enjoy?
Okay. So how long I've been a gamer? Pretty much all my life in a way. Yeah. So obviously, like when I was like five, I was like I played a lot of like handheld games, because I have two older brothers, and it's kind of like the way things are. So obviously you have like the main console, and could barely touch on that, because they were mostly playing on it. So if I ever got a chance, like it had to be like when they're away. So kind of my earliest console was like a Game Boy Color.
Yeah.
And I probably like one of the first few games I played was Pokemon, the original Pokemon, Pokemon Red.
Yep.
So that was sort of like the start of it, and obviously I really like Pokemon. But the game that connected with me a lot, I was about like 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old, and we had Final Fantasy VIII for the PlayStation 1. And I remember putting that one in and watching the very much the opening cinematic, and I was blown away by it. And I thought this was the coolest thing ever. Like the opening fight between Skull and Cypher,
Mhm.
and like watching that whole choreography, and I was like, oh my God. And that's kind of like what started me on the Final Fantasy journey. So yeah, if you ask me like what my favorite game series like going on after that, Final Fantasy is definitely up there. That's like one of the top three for me.
Nice.
Uh, so yeah, so that's kind of like where it began. In terms of things like streaming, in a way was a bit recent, but I don't really have like much of a cult following. It's mostly just my close friends and then kind of like the community of a little bit of like the people I've played with. They generally keep up with me on that. And that's purely for things like Final Fantasy 14 mostly. That's because as I do quite a lot of the raiding, and something that I've noticed, especially when it comes to progging those raids, having your own footage or someone else's footage, but really your own footage is really helpful to learn the fights and kind of like continue on that front. So that's mostly what kind of kickstarted it. That would have been about, I think, just a little bit before pandemic. That's kind of when I started to raid, and I mostly just kept streaming. And then, in a way, some of my friends just mostly keep watching. And then I kind of just kept it up as a hobby because it's just something that I think is kind of fun to do. And I like to keep a sort of record of other games that I've played and when I am streaming. So that way, I can look back and be like, oh yeah, I played that game, or oh yeah, I remember that part. It's kind of like it's more like a journal in a way. I like to keep it as like a bit of an archive, in that way. So that's kind of why I like doing it.
I really like that as far as having the journal because I did a brief amount of time. I did some streaming myself, and that was, yeah. You mentioned kind of like the journaling aspect of it, where I can go back and look like, oh yeah, this is what we played at this time, and this is
Yeah.
like the things that we did, and it's interesting to see how games change and evolve over time too, especially for those kind of whether it is an MMO or even some of the I did some like early access type games, and it was interesting to see how those progress as well. So absolutely love that. And I definitely want to touch on the idea of taking the recordings, taking
Mhm.
the session and learning from it, right? And
Mhm.
like with the progression, with the prog on these raids, to go back and watch the footage because that's something that when you say that, I don't, yeah, unless you know probably more than I,
Mhm.
it's like how many raiders actually do that? Because I know even when I was raiding, like that's not something we did.
Really? I think it's really common. I don't know if you watched much of the World Race of 14. Have you watched much of that?
No, yeah,
Uh,
when they're going for the first kills, yeah, no.
yeah. because I think they do it quite a lot there. Like that one is obviously way more intense because because I know you play a bit of 14, you know, like the raids is usually it's an 8-man party.
Yep.
But in the community, if you ever do like a world race, a lot of the high end teams they have somebody called like a ninth man, and the ninth man, or maybe even a tenth man as well. But the ninth man or the tenth man, what happens is they're usually watching somebody stream, like one of their members stream. Maybe they're streaming like a Discord call or something.
Mm.
And then whenever they wipe, they will like look back and try to like analyze the footage to kind of like see, oh, like how did they die? What was the way that they died? Was it by damage? Was it a certain mechanic? Did they get a certain debuff and stuff like that? So I think it is pretty common in like the progression scene where people look at like they look at footage and then they rewind and they try to like learn like oh like what is it you know what did I fail on? What was the wipe? What was the mistake? So I'm at least from what I can tell, I think it's pretty common. Um, like I'm not at a world first level. And like I wouldn't say I'm close, but like I'm kind of, I guess, high in the hardcore sense. Um, so I guess in that sense, there's not many that would stream
Mm.
in my groups or like kind of do that. But personally, for me, it's really helpful because another really common thing if you do a lot of these raids or you do a lot of these fights is uh, they obviously don't mean it, but people can be wrong in terms of what they may have failed on or like what isn't really the mistake. And that could be a thing of where they don't really like take accountability, or it could just be like they really genuinely don't know. And that's where having that footage has, because they can't argue with the footage, right? Like the footage is the footage. So if I see something and I'm like, oh, your character did this, I could tell it's very much like this. Then they can look at it and be like, oh, okay. And then they learn something from it as well. And they're like, oh, okay, well, this is what I thought happened. I'm like, yeah, no, it needs to be like this, or it needs to be done like that, or, stuff like that. So that's where, for me, I like having that footage. In a way, it's like insurance, but you get to like learn from your own mistakes. You get to really see the specifics of
I love that. And what's interesting about that is that that's the same technique that they
it.
use in a lot of sports, right? Whether you
Mhm.
talk, football, basketball, soccer,
Yeah,
all these major sports, right? Like the coaches will sit the players down and be like, "All right,
yeah,
we're going to watch this last game. We're going to watch
yeah.
what you did, and we're going to learn from, like I said, those kind of mistakes, right? It's like, hey, you did this here. What were you thinking? Or it's like, hey, what if we did it this way instead? Right.
Hmm.
So it's absolutely an amazing, teaching tool to say like to
Yeah.
take that footage to go back and rewatch it and understand kind of where the mess ups are, where what are the things you can change and improve.
Hmm.
So absolutely love that and huge. And so from that kind of I don't know if you call it like maybe the competitive level, but at least like that
Yeah.
hardcore first progression levels, like that's absolutely like I can see where that's actually like necessary, right? Because
Yeah.
like I'll say and again, like when I did more hardcore stuff, like years ago at this point, uh, I'll say before OBS to kind of put it in
Hmm.
perspective. So there wasn't really much in the way of recording stuff.
Right.
There was,
Yeah.
there was Fraps, if you've heard of that one.
Yes. Yeah.
That
I know
was
that
like
one.
very, very basic, right, kind of stuff. So like, I played with that like a little bit, but like, yeah. So streaming, yeah, especially OBS and stuff, didn't exist. So like that whole aspect of it, because doing kind of the hardcore stuff back then, it was just like, well, you just had to like, hopefully somebody recorded it and you could kind of learn from that, or you just had to kind of
Right.
like you're saying, like you discuss with everybody and kind of fight with each other to say like
Yeah.
who did what. Like I
Yeah.
did this. It's like no, you didn't. I did this. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I imagine, right, like especially the stories I hear back then, like the fights there, they tend to last like months or like weeks. Because now these days, with the world race and stuff like that, at least in 14's case, at most, I mean, the world race is over in about like 2 days. If we're talking about like the savage raids,
Yeah.
that's usually about like 1 or 2 days. And the whole savage tier is usually going to be done about a week for like the hardcore players. So yeah, like but you hear the stories of like the old raids and stuff like that, and people are like, oh yeah, like the world first was like a month, or like a world first was like a couple of months and stuff. Like, 'cause I quite like a lot of video game history as well, or like learning about a lot of the old stories. So I know about stuff like there was, I think it was Absolute Virtue, which is a Final Fantasy XI boss, and that's
Mm,
like really old, and
yep.
that took like I think it was like 3 months or something. It was some really insane amount of time just to do. And yeah, imagine without recording or anything like that, how do you solve the puzzle? Like,
Yeah, how do you solve the puzzle when nobody can agree on what
yeah,
happened, right? Like, nobody can
yeah,
agree on the pieces, right? So you're like,
yeah,
I don't know how to make the puzzle. So you're absolutely right. So yeah, it's amazing how much has changed in that kind of that where it sounds like more commonplace now, right? To just say like, oh well, we'll just record it and we'll have
yeah,
people watching it. It's one thing to say like, oh well, we'll go back and watch it, but it's interesting you mentioned that like the Ninth Man or something, somebody who's actively watching and is
yeah,
like, oh no, this is what's happening, which is why you can get that more immediate instant feedback, which is very key, very big for especially not only gamers, but most people, but especially
mm,
gamers. We love the instant feedback, right?
yeah,
That's how games work, right? Like
yep,
you put an input, something happens, and you get that immediate feedback to say, ah, well, this did this, so don't do that next time because that got me
yeah,
killed, whatever.
exactly.
Yeah. So understanding having that quick feedback because yeah, so when you don't have the recordings and then when you can't agree on what happened and it's like yeah so that's so you can kind of see why it took months to get certain things done
Yes.
because nobody could agree on what even happened.
Well, yeah.
I absolutely love that. So using that gaming as the kind of the teaching tool and I love kind of the analogy like I said crossing that into other aspects of life whether it is like coaching for sports teams and going back and looking and seeing what happened, right? And it's just like a concept that I think works really well. And
Yeah.
I'd say for anyone, listening as well, just, taking, yeah, not necessarily like recording yourself every day, but but
Hmm.
just kind of it's kind of a concept of just kind of learning from experience, right? Learning from
Yeah.
past experience, learning from failure, and then learning from other people's failure because that's
Hmm.
another nice thing is when you can observe whether recorded or not to say like oh somebody did this and then as a result something else happened and
Yeah.
being able to either model or to know not to model certain
Hmm.
behaviors because that way you'll know that you'll get ahead for certain aspects of that. So have you seen that help you in any other aspect as far as so beyond Final Fantasy like where has that kind of
Hmm.
skill worked for you?
Yeah. I think with you touching on the sport, like that is something that I kind of like it's the first kind of go-to I relate it to, at least especially with this with like rating. I generally always say like, if you think about it like a sport, because uh my dad, he doesn't really like obviously get this kind of thing. He doesn't really get like gaming or anything like that. But he loves the game of cricket. I don't know if you're British or anything. Cricket is
American, so I'm only familiar with cricket by name.
okay. Yeah, it's the English baseball in a way.
Right.
Uh, so he very much loves the game of cricket. That's like his whole life. That's like his in a way game.
Hmm.
So but he never really understood what I'm doing. So every time I was like kind of playing it, it was just kind of confusing. But when I kind of compared it to like, oh, it's like a sport, because the thing with cricket is you need 11 people on your team, yourself included. So that's sort of like your team, 11 aside. And when I'm playing it, he's just kind of thinking I'm by myself and I'm playing it by myself. And I have to basically like tell him like, no, like think of it as like I have a team. Like, this is a designated time. We're spending a couple of hours together, like how you would play cricket, right? With cricket, you would probably spend 1 day a week and you would um, spend a couple of hours. You're just playing that sport. And that's basically what I'm doing here. I'm designating like a few hours at the time, playing. I've got my own team. I'm like the skipper. That's the like the captain.
Hmm.
And we're gonna do this for a few hours, and then I'm free and stuff like that. So with that kind of aspect of it, that's kind of like with sports. I always compare it to like that aspect of the game. I always compare it to like sports, where I'm like, think of it like this sport. And I've had people come in where they are wanting to like learn more on the hardcore side of things, or like they want to improve as a player. And again, that's where I sort of use the more sport analogy because a lot of people, when they come into it, they are obviously like kind of casually playing. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like obviously you're playing at like your own leisure, right? You pick it up whenever you play. Um, so they don't really kind of get that concept of like going at a designated time and then raiding and like, doing a boss. But then I tell them like, okay, think of it this way, where, if you had a sporting event, like you're going to go for a football match or a cricket match or something, you would designate one day of the week, you would designate like a certain sort of time, and then you would play that sport for like maybe a few hours, right? And then usually they're kind of like, actually, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I'm like, that's kind of like what I'm asking, or like a band practice thing, right? Like that's all I'm kind of asking for is you kind of just take a bit of your time out of there, you come to the session, and then, you know, play it for a bit. If there's something going on, you let us know beforehand, obviously. But yeah, I kind of like relate it a lot to those real world events. So I think with that, like what I've learned from the game, I kind of like apply that logic, and it's good to use in those kind of analogies, especially helping others when they want to learn to play the game as well.
Absolutely. And so you said you're the captain or the skipper or the raid leader, if you will, of your groups usually?
Yeah, yeah, usually. So I ran a few groups, and usually I've been the leader of it. For the past few tiers, so there is the current tier, the cruiserweight, Savage, and the tier before that, I've just joined a group with a different leader. Uh, but beforehand, I used to kind of be a part of two groups where I had one where I was like a sort of super hardcore group, and then one where I was helping friends
Gotcha.
and like other people kind of play through, and I was like the leader of that group.
Gotcha. So, that's why I ask, because I'm sure you can understand, right? So being that leader, being that in charge, right? Because that's kind of where my journey came from and started actually. For doing this, doing helping gamers, especially with like their leadership and their career skills. That's if I could tell you like the quick story, I think some of the listeners may have heard, but the quick version is that so I worked at one of these big Fortune 500 companies.
Right.
And I was kind of on autopilot, if you will, like, kind of like, yeah, do what you're supposed to do. I guess I'm going to move up, right, in the organization. I'm going to get promotions. And I got to like a level where it's like, all right, well, I got to move up. And I got passed over for promotion. And I was like, what's going on? So I go to my boss. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for a raise and a promotion. They're like, well, we just don't see your leadership potential.
Right.
I was like, oof. I just don't understand corporate leadership. Okay. And then I was going home, and then so to give you a time frame, this was actually when I was playing Star Wars: The Old Republic, if you've heard or seen that MMO.
Yes.
Uh, and so we were doing the latest whatever the rate was at the time, and they measure them in nightmare difficulty was their version of Savage, right?
Yeah.
And and we were doing this, and we're just plugging away like a couple nights a week. We weren't like super hardcore, but we were like definitely on like the progression side. We were the hardcore casuals or the casual hardcores. We floated that line. We're like
Mm.
we knew our shit. We were like doing it, and
Right. Yeah.
but we only did like 2 nights a week.
Yeah.
But eventually, we finally beat it. Right? We finally beat
Yeah.
this like the current content. And I was like, oh my gosh, good job, guys, we did it, hooray! And then come to find out that I had no idea. They're like, it's like, no, 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 like you don't understand. Like we're server second, like in terms of
Oh wow.
progression. Like, so out of all the servers, right? Like for our particular server, we were second to
Yeah,
actually
you
clear
guys are
this. I was
second.
like, holy crap. And so we're like, put in the millions of players, right? So it's like, hey, we're in the top 1% in the world
Yeah.
on this game. I'm like, well damn, all right.
Yeah.
Awesome. And they're like, thank you, Daniel. That was so cool. You've been such a great leader.
Mm.
I was like, wait a minute. He didn't say raid leader. He didn't say
Yeah.
guild leader. He said
He said
leader.
leader.
Exactly.
Nice.
So I was like, wait a minute. Leadership is leadership,
Yeah.
regardless of how you learn it in the context of learning it. Like it's just being able to help and guide people, right? In
Mm.
whatever context. So I was like, well, how can I treat work a little bit more like a game and actually use
Yeah.
these skills over there?
Mm.
So I started working with like cross-functional teams and started, pulling stuff together that way. And then within 3 months, got a raise and a promotion
Mm.
because they saw my leadership skills. And they're like, wow, you developed your leadership skills fast. I'm like, not really. I already had them. I just needed to show them to you.
Yeah, right.
So that's what kind of catapulted my journey to kind of what I'm doing now is to say, yeah, I want to help gamers kind of take this kind of same journey that I took to say like, hey, you have these skills. And that's why
Mm,
Naz, I think you too, right? Like being a leader, coming that same, role kind of where I came from as far as, the hardcore raider and raid leader, where it's like you have leadership skills that
mm,
you can use outside of that.
right.
It's so powerful and it's so huge. And so that's why I encourage, all the gamers listening and watching too, is to say, you have the skills. It's
Mm,
just being able to translate them
yeah.
into usable career skills. It's a minor thing. Like you're 90% there.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I see that. I see where you're coming from. I've had like a pretty similar thing. This is a funny story that when I told it to a group of my friends, they said like, "Oh yeah, you should like put it on like a Reddit or something, or like publish it somewhere," because basically the job that I got now is kind of a recent one in an IT profession. I didn't used to work at this job. I used to work in retail prior to that one, but I was kind of looking for something a bit more closer to my degree, which was with an IT background.
Yep.
And I was looking for like jobs, and I had like this interview, and basically the key thing in that interview, because what I mostly do is I get on a lot of calls like this one, for instance, and I'm either like teaching people how to use like certain like how to use the software. It's like I mostly do a lot of testing and helping other customers implement like this software into their business. One of the things the interviewer asked me was like, well, how would you feel about talking to strangers that you never met online, and then basically try to like teach them stuff. And like it sounds kind of daunting and intimidating because I'm like, well, I don't really know this software and stuff like that. But I was like, I'm used to talking to people online because I've I play a game where I said that to them. I said I talk to loads of random people on the internet all the time for like past COVID. That was pretty much all I did every day, right? And
Yep.
I would teach them random stuff about fights. So I like to think that I could do that, and that's kind of what got me the job there. So I definitely think there is like a sort of translation of like, oh, stuff you can learn like in these coordinated settings or like from games that can then help be applied into like real life scenarios.
That's awesome. So using that analogy, like I just love that ability, like that certain skill
Hmm.
that you can just take and be like, oh yeah, just talking to random people online, right? So like just
Hmm.
being in Discord, chatting with people, rating
Hmm.
is a skill that the company was looking for, right? They were looking, hey, can
Yeah,
you talk
kind
to
of.
random people on
Yeah,
the internet?
because it was like, can you talk to strangers? Can you tell them what it is? Like, can you tell them what the software is? And it's like when I'm rating, I'm doing the call outs. So, like then I was doing like the call outs. And I was telling them like, oh yeah, this is what you gotta do with the fight. I was showing them video guides. So to be like, this is learn from this. Oh, when the boss does this or says this, and I'm like, saying all that kind of stuff. It's not really any different to me going on a call and being like, oh, can you go on this, do that? Oh, try doing this, and do it that way. And yeah, it's kind of like very similar what I've got now in my current profession. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's because it does. It feels like the same thing, and being able
Mm,
to, and I think you had the really great experience too, where you could use your actual gaming, like the actual
mm,
story from doing that in a game as part of like the interview process, right? Is what you're saying.
mm,
Like, you literally told them, hey, this is what I did, and I do this in this game all the time, right?
mm,
Use that because I think there's going to be more of that. Like, I feel like the society's kind of changing a little bit, and understanding, especially like gamification, is like become this big thing too,
yes.
where people understand that, or they're starting to see the value of gaming and kind of game mechanics.
Yeah.
And so with the whole gamification thing, which, I've talked on this podcast at least a few times about, is just taking the business side of it and just like these gaming elements to make it more compelling or interesting or engaging. But I'm here like pushing the way forward behind it, saying like, oh, and gamers also
Mm,
have these skills because of it. So they're going to be much better hires as a result because they're going to bring all these skills automatically with them. So you don't have to
mm,
necessarily teach them, right? I think in your example, it's just like, oh yeah, as soon as you understand, the software, it's like you're good to go, right? Because you already
yeah.
know how to teach people and teach random people, strangers online.
Mm,
Done.
yeah.
Oh,
Exactly.
that is so good. So tell us a little bit on the IT side. So besides, I guess the getting into the job and getting or using this kind of talking to people skills. So I guess what else have you noticed from being a gamer in the IT profession? Like what has helped?
So it's kind of a bit of a tough one with this job per se. I think mostly the sort of more trial and error aspect of the job because or that level of like persistence as well with it.
Yep.
Because I do have to do a lot of like testing implementations of other people's code and stuff like that into this software. Because I am sort of more like the tester side of the role. And especially if it's a customer that wants a specific thing, I have to try to find like different workarounds in terms of like how to get it working and stuff like that. And that can take me like a lot of time. That sometimes it could be really fast. I'm like, oh yeah, I know, totally know what that is. Sometimes it might require a bit more, and I need to like go out and ask for help and stuff like that. But that kind of application from the game aspect is, I guess, in a way like progression, like progressing through, progressing rating, or anything like that. Especially that level of persistence, because usually if there's like a workaround, or if I can't find a workaround, I'll definitely like keep hammering on until I can try to find something. And then like what I'll do is I'll like take a break from it and then maybe come back in the next like 30 minutes or so, be like, all right, you know what, I'm gonna give it another crack at it. And that's kind of in a way very similar to things like progression rating, where you're always trying to get to that same prog point. Especially in 14, it's always a case of you got to get to that next prog point. You got to keep getting there, keep getting there. You know, if you're white, you start over, you're doing it again until you get to the prog point again and again and again. And then you maybe take a break, but you got to keep going until you eventually get that kill. So that level of persistence, I think, is something that has very much carried on through, as well as a bit of that problem solving aspect where it's like, you know, I'm looking back and I'm like thinking, okay, like, let me break it down. This worked, this worked. What's happening here? What's the root cause of this issue that I could then try to figure out? So, like, those kind of two aspects, I think, are the biggest things that's translated through into this job in particular.
That's awesome. Yeah, the sense of progression, the sense of just persistence,
Mm,
of just continually trying and huge in of course progression rating. And I'd say just in a lot of games in general, where it's just
yeah.
kind of exploring exploring the game mechanics of the game, like just trying to. You could even say
Mm,
just trying different buttons. Like what is this
yeah.
button? Like I don't need a tutorial. Let me just click them all and just see what they do, right? And just being able to quickly get into a situation and just being able to find out like what all you can do, right? It's
Mm,
just huge. I think that a lot of gamers have that when you drop them into a new situation, they can quickly find their bearings, if you will, to say
yeah.
like, all right, what can I do? What can I affect? What can I not? Because usually the game world, it's limited in that way where it's like, you're on certain rails and you're like, okay, they'll push up against the walls, right? You're like, at what point can I break the game or what can I do? What can I not? So that persistence is huge. Just be able to try different things, both in terms of progression and understanding, just kind
Mm,
of what you can do. And the problem solving, I'm glad you mentioned because that is definitely my top
yeah.
promotion, like top skill that I will sing from the mountaintops, whatever it needs to be, right? To say that all gamers, doesn't matter what game, we are the best problem solvers on the planet
Mm.
because we do it for fun.
Basically, yeah.
It's so true. It's just like it boggles my mind when I went into situations like in a corporate environment where it's like how like I didn't say it out loud, but it's like how did you not figure this out? Like this
Mm,
is the problem. Like you just need to do this, and you're like,
yeah.
but the gamers, it's our superpower, and that's what I've heard, what I've learned is that
Mm,
when we say superpowers in the real world we mean skills that are so amazing as compared to, I guess, other people's abilities. And your superpower will never feel like a superpower, right? In
mm,
terms of like you watch any of the Marvels, like
yeah, yeah,
it won't feel like that. It'll feel just like it's a normal day.
yeah.
But you'll understand and you'll notice it's a superpower when you look at those around you trying to do what you do.
Mm,
And the problem solving aspect every time I've noticed that where it's just if it's a non-gamer going into a problem, they will not solve it as quickly. And
mm,
it's not, so I want to say to those listening, right? It's not because they're slow. It's like, oh,
mm,
they're dumb. It's like, no, it's they don't have your skill set. This
mm.
is your
Yeah,
skill. This
definitely.
this is what you can build on.
Yeah,
So
like
cool.
it's amazing, like, because it's amazing how people figure out a lot of the stuff or a lot of the puzzles. Because to be honest, like, I'm not really the first one to figure out this kind of stuff. But like, eventually it will click for anybody, and it just kind of comes natural. And then you'll be surprised that, like, for anyone listening, like, oh wow, like I could do that, or I could do this, and it'll become like second nature. Like that's the real big thing is that it
Yeah.
becomes like almost immediately, and you'll just be surprised at how others do not have this ability. And I'm like taken aback with a lot of the stuff that I can do, where I would be like, I can do it, even like in both in gaming and outside of gaming. Because like another thing with 14, I play that one predominantly controller, um, which like it's a console game as well, and a lot of people do play it with controller, but I main Astrologian on controller, and
Wow.
that's something that yeah. See, so you know what that's like.
I know. I'll say
Yeah.
for the for those that don't play 14 or don't play Astrologian, how would you describe Astrologian on a controller?
A lot of buttons. Yeah,
A lot of buttons, right?
a lot of buttons. So yeah,